think we can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, then, yes, let's start. Doron, thank you for accepting my invitation for an interview. I wanted to have this in Istanbul, but things changed. We couldn't have it. I'm so glad that we saw each other in Penn State at this 85th birthday of George and Bruce. And yeah, thank you for actually taking the time. And as the tradition goes, I will set up a 15-minute timer. I want to have a natural conversation with you. And at the end, when the timer goes off, I can just thank you.
I'm very pleased and honored, and I really enjoyed your previous videos.
Thank you. I mean, it's an honor that you're watching it. So, okay, I will set up a 15-minute timer.
That's good.
And let's see how it goes. So, the first thing I want to ask you is, you're an avid computer algebraist. You promote computer algebra in every circle. What do you find what would you like mathematicians in general to know about computer algebra? That sometimes they have this distance to computers.
A better name for computer algebra is symbolic computation, and the French call it calcul formel. And computer algebra is a little bit confusing because for most people, algebra is just high school algebra. And indeed, computer algebra is a manifestation of high school algebra, not to be confused with abstract algebra. And in my humble opinion, this is the way to go. And I think that symbolic computation is really an underdog. It should be much more appreciated. And recently, the fashion and the last cry as the logic-based computation, Cork and Lean, and I appreciate it, and it's nice, but in my opinion, this is not the right way to go. And I was very disappointed and a little bit upset in the recent special issue of the bulletin of the AMS. There are lots of articles about computerizing mathematics, but most of it is, everything they covered was this new, this approach, logic-based programming, and just furthering the agenda of what I call Greek mathematics. And I really like what I called Babylonian and Indian Chinese mathematics. There are really two traditions in mathematics. The one that came from Greece, even though Euclid did something good, he invented or discovered the Euclidean algorithm, a beautiful algorithm, still very useful today. For example, in
Matrix
RSA, in cryptography, but then it became the dominant culture for the last 2,500 years. And a parallel tradition was an algorithmic tradition that started in Babylonia, and then algorithmy, the one whose algorithm is named after him. And in my opinion, and hopefully, eventually, computer, it's not a contest, and this is the logic-based computerized approach to mathematics is worthwhile, but right now it's getting much more press than it should, and symbolic computation is still, in some sense, an underdog and backwater. And I think it's wrong. So hopefully it will change.
So if I can summarize, I think what you're criticizing maybe is that formalizing mathematics is just teaching the already known mathematics to computers.
Exactly. It's furthering the agenda. They have this agenda of rigorous proof, and I think that eventually they will become obsolete, and they're still just using it to further their own agenda and adapting it. It's a little bit in the famous book by Richard Feynman, You Must Be Joking, Mr. Feynman, that somebody religious asked him some questions in science, and it turned out that the only motivation was how it applies to their view. They didn't really care about science per se. They just wanted to have something that applies to their belief. So in my opinion, the current mainstream party line in mathematics is that everything has to be proved rigorously. It's going to be obsolete because everybody talks about undecided. Everybody knows about the Gödel proved that some statements are true but undecidable. So I think this is a big misunderstanding, because if it's meaningful, so all the so-called undecidable statements, they are not provable because they are meaningless. Every meaningful statement is provable in principle, but not in practice. But something much more significant than that Gödel proved is they exist arbitrarily, they exist short, hence elegant statements. For example, the statement of the four colors theorem is an example. They have arbitrarily long proofs. So eventually, about in 1993, I coined the term semi-rigorous. And for a while, it made some splash. And George Andrews, my frenemy, had a very counter argument, appeared in mathematical intelligentsia. But in this recent issue, it was completely forgotten. They completely ignore this notion of semi-rigorous mathematics. So I'm sure eventually people will realize that most interesting statements are not even provable by computers, and they have to make do with, at best, semi-rigorous proof, in which, in principle, if you had enough computing time, there's a proof, but with probability 99.99%, you can
might have
prove it. And eventually, not even this, with just experimental heuristic proof. In other words, mathematics become a true science and not this artificial logic-based, axiomatic-based, which is just like mental. It's just a game, like chess. It's a nice game and it's a rewarding game, but it's not science. And hopefully, eventually, mathematics will become a true science and not as artificial game, possibly fun like chess or Go.
And you do a lot of experimentation and semi-rigorous, you said, but you do a lot of proofs using your computer.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you this. So this is the question that I really wanted to ask. When did you get the idea that you should give your computer a name and then it should be your co-author? Like Shalosh Ekat is a household name for combinatorics, but you're the only one that came up with this idea.
Yes. At the time, I have to have a confession to make. I didn't know anything about computing, and I even looked down on anything to do with computer. I was a pure snob. And when I was, I had this job when I was fairly young at Drexel. The chair asked me if I'm interested in a computer, and I laughed at him. but then I had a specific, in 1982, I found that Sister Celine had a beautiful algorithm that she didn't realize the full scope. For her, the motivation was in orthogonal polynomials to find a way to find what she calls pure recurrence relations of hypergeometric sum that came up in special function. But then I realized the scope of it, that not all, but many of the combinatorial sum binomial coefficient sums can be applied. So, but at the time, I didn't think to me to implement it. But then it turned out to be fun to implement it. And then I started to learn Max. So I had a religious conversion. And I realized, and I asked my chair to get Maxima. At the time, Maxima was a computer algebra system before Mathematica. And I learned Maxima. And then very clumsily, I programmed the Sister Celine, and then it came to me, and then I found about Gauss algorithm and the so-called creative telescoping and the Zeilberger algorithm. And then I got really into it. And it so happened my wife worked for AT&T, Bell Labs. And at the time, they had this very innovative Unix PC, very powerful for its time, for the mid 1980s. And usually it cost $7,000 at the time, was a big money. But for an employee, you get it for $2,000. So we took advantage, and the model name was 3B1 because it was developed in Bell Labs. And in Bell Labs, the offices have the format number, letter, number. So 3 means building 3, B means corridor B, and 1 means room 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so the model number was called 3B1, and Shalosh B Echad is as a Hebrew translation of this. So then from then on, I co-authored a lot of paper with Shalosh B Echad, and it's another pet peeve of mine. Right now, people are really, it's all right now to be sexist and even and sexual orientation and all these things that for diversity is fine. But the last frontier is human-centric and not giving enough credit for computers. So without the computers, so I think it started as a joke, but now I really mean it seriously.
Yeah, some computations definitely pass the like what humans can achieve. I mean,
yes,
that are in mind.
And they deserve full credit.
Yeah,
and mine they probably have feelings. So
that's soon enough. Maybe not now, but
right.
So you already mentioned a couple of major algorithms like creative telescoping, which you named it. Now mostly it's called, I mean, help and out. It's called Zeilberger's algorithm after you. Then there's like Gosper's algorithm. Then there's Sister Celine's. These are like the 3 of the 5 chapters basically of your A equals B book.
Exactly.
Right? So how did that came about? It's like you
built
a
good story. Check. In this conference, somebody mentioned the Cornell conference on computer algebra was a watershed in computer algebra in Ithaca, beautiful Ithaca. And my good friend, the late Herb Wilf, that I miss a lot, and the younger one, unfortunately also recently passed away, Marco Petkovsek, who has this amazing Petkovsek algorithm, which was a hyper. It was a far-reaching extension of Gosper's algorithm. And it was really Herb's idea to have a joint. So we joined a book together. So we went to the vegetarian restaurant in Ithaca, very famous, based on the famous Moosewood cookbook. And I hope it still exists, but I'm not sure. And then we had a nice meal. And then Herb, who was very organized and is such a prolific writer, and he wrote like possibly 20 very, very great books. He drafted the table of content and assigned for each of us what chapters to write.
I hope he assigned you the like Gosper's algorithm.
no, Gosper algorithm was Marco's.
I see.
So I got possibly the most creative one, the introduction and motivation, and the last chapter 7, about future directions.
Yeah.
And 2 chapters, Gosper and Hyper, were done by Marco.
Yeah.
But most of the book, 5 chapters, were done by Herb Wilf.
He
was such a good writer.
Yeah.
And for him, it was almost effortless. And the format and the very nice style and very readable.
But actually, introduction is really readable too. But I was just joking. I thought you almost surely you would have written the Zeilberger's algorithm bit. But I mean,
no, they Herb did it.
Yeah. so interesting. Yeah.
He did a great job. And it was nice about that the font, when he had computer code, he put it in TypeScript font. And so it was very readable.
And things that are in the introduction of that book are still mentioned today, almost verbatim. Like today, Shane Chen gave a talk and then said, like, how would you prove that like a difference of 2 recurrences are exactly the same?
Yes.
And then he showed that you can add the recurrences and showed that it's exactly the same.
Right,
exactly 0 at 5 points. I still remember this from the introduction of that book.
Oh, right.
It's the exact, almost verbatim, the exact same thing.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. And another thing about A equals B fame is the motto by Don Knuth, that I was lucky. That's why I was late one day for the conference. I couldn't miss his banquet talk. It's a Richard Stanley conference that unfortunately conflicted with this conference. And even George Andrews had to leave early. He gave the first talk in the Richard Stanley conference. So at least one person gave the famous quote of Don Knuth. It's also reproduced in the Wikipedia entry of Don Knuth. Something about science and art. Now I'm blacking out. Everything everything that you can teach a computer is a science.
Mhm.
The rest is an art, or something like this. Anyway, it was a,
I see. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Don Knuth is, of course, a big legend. I wish I was there too. But thankfully, I got to see him in your like experimental nets, like this online.
right. Yeah, it's a
conference.
dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great speaker still. Yeah,
Yeah.
He's really impressive. He's 86 and a half, still going strong.
Yeah.
And he still hopes to finish the 7 volumes
Oh,
for
really?
the art of computer
Wow.
programming.
Wow. I'm. That would be great to
Right.
hear. Yeah, that would be
But
great
right
to
now he has volume 4, but he has three sub volumes.
coming up. I see.
Yeah.
Well, the
Okay.
time is time is off, but I want to ask you one more question.
Yeah, don't go over time.
Yeah, we can go a tiny bit over time, and
All right.
maybe after this, like we can call
Okay.
it. So I heard that you almost came to my hometown, hometown Ankara, as a postdoc, like many years ago, but it never got realized. So, how did that happen?
Yes, well, right after my PhD, that my advisor was an analyst, and he gave me a question in analysis. So my approach was to find a discrete analog. Then I forgot about the original problem, and I really got into so-called discrete analytic function. At the time, it was a backwater, not very fashionable subject. Now discrete mathematics is very hot by the time, and also the job market was really bad. So when the first year I was unable to get a postdoctoral position at the States. But then I found out, I read a very nice paper by, at the time, young Turkish mathematician Mehmet Orhon.
Mehmet Orhon.
Yeah,
Orhon.
and I really liked it. And then I thought, why not go? And I also had a romantic attachment to Turkey, and I liked Turkish food, Turkish culture, and it seemed so exotic. So I just took a long shot, and I applied and to my great delight, I was accepted as first I was getting offered as an assistant professor.
Wow.
But because of bureaucracy and as a Weizmann Institute, I didn't have an official PhD yet because they sent it to outside reviewers.
Oh, I see.
So I had to be an instructor, but that's okay. It was a bit less money, but I really liked it. But as soon as I came, now it's very, and now we have all this revolt encampment. But at the time, the students had a student rebellion. I'm not sure.
1980s.
In 97, no, it was 1976. The winter of 1976 was a student rebellion. And it's a little bit now, currently they call the police, but there they call the army. So they had tanks in the campus, and it was a student strike. And I'm not, being in Israel, I'm not afraid of tanks, but the atmosphere was not very conducive for doing. So I decided to resign after 1 week. So I went back to Israel. And luckily I got a postdoc at the Institute of Advanced Study the next year. So for a few months, I was supported by my parents.
I mean, not a good look for Turkey, but yeah, that's a dark time.
But I really enjoy Turkey. I really love Turkey. Too bad it didn't work out.
I mean, yeah, we were lucky enough to have you also in Istanbul last year.
Yeah.
Was it last year? 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was a great time too. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your hospitality.
And I mean, yeah. Maybe it's for the best. I mean, that you didn't stay in analysis and learn about computer algebra. Then the 3B1 came and everything. Yeah. Well, thank you, Doron, for this interview.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure. Yeah. Looking forward to future interviews.
Thanks.